"Now that your husband is dead," Vanessa said, her tone as smooth as ice, "grieve, pack your bags, and never come back." The words sliced through the air like glass. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard her. My hands froze around the framed photo of my husband, the one we'd displayed beside his casket just hours earlier. Then the frame slipped, shattered against the floor, and his smiling face cracked down the middle. It wasn't just a sentence, it was a verdict. I looked up. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway of my living room, arms folded, chin lifted slightly, as if she'd been waiting years to say those words. Behind her, sunlight cut across the rug, the same rug I'd chosen 20 years ago with my late husband, Henry, the same rug she'd once said was too old-fashioned. "Excuse me?" I whispered, my throat dry. She didn't flinch. "You heard me. This house, this life, it was his. Now it's over." Her heels clicked against the tile as she turned and walked away, leaving the faint smell of her expensive perfume. Lilac and cruelty. For a long moment I couldn't move. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears. Outside, the last guests from the funeral were still backing their cars out of the driveway, waving politely through the glass. None of them knew what had just been said. I bent down, picked up the broken frame, and brushed a sliver of glass from my husband's face. "Henry," I whispered, "did you hear that?" The candlelight trembled, as if answering. When the door finally shut behind the last visitor, I was alone. The flowers were already wilting, their sweet scent turning heavy, almost sour. I sat on the couch we'd bought on our 10th anniversary and tried to breathe. 50 years of love, gone, reduced to a single sentence. Down the hallway, laughter echoed. Vanessa and my son, my only son, were talking in low voices. I caught fragments of their words, appraisal, listing, a split it evenly. So soon? The body was barely cold. I pressed my palms against my knees to stop the shaking. My chest felt tight, but not from grief anymore, from clarity. "When did I start buying love with my savings?" I asked the silence. There was no answer, only the ticking of the old wall clock, Henry's clock, steady, unbothered, marking time while my world collapsed. At midnight, I opened the ledger I'd kept for years. Every check, every gift, every transfer. Tuition for our grandchildren, $1,200. The down payment for their house, $85,000. Birthday checks, Christmas bonuses, just in case you need help. Page after page of proof that generosity can turn into chains. I could almost hear Henry's voice in my head again. "Patience isn't weakness, Clara. It's strategy." And right then, I decided grief would not be my cage. It would be my disguise. When the first light of dawn crept across the blinds, I stood, feeling the stiffness in my knees and the new strength behind it. I dressed slowly, soft cardigan, gray skirt, wedding ring still on my finger. I looked at my reflection. Tired eyes, silver hair, but something new flickered there, a calm fire. At 9 a.m., I walked into First Atlantic Bank. The teller recognized me, her face full of sympathy. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I said gently. "I'm here to make a few adjustments." Within 20 minutes, every automatic transfer to my son's account was canceled. The joint authorization on the house fund, removed. When the banker asked if I was sure, I smiled faintly. Oh, I've never been more sure of anything in my 78 years. 2 hours later, Vanessa called. Her voice was sharp, edges cutting through the speaker. "Mom, the bank says the transfer didn't go through. What happened?" I let a pause stretch. 3 seconds of silence that felt like an eternity. Then I answered, softly but firmly, "I only help special people." The line went dead. For the first time in years, the house was quiet in a way that didn't hurt. The air felt lighter, like the windows had finally been opened after a long winter. Outside, 2 mourning doves perched on the fence. Henry used to feed them every Sunday morning. I smiled. You see that, love? She thinks she buried me with you." I took out a notebook and began to write. Dates, words, every insult, every transaction, every call. Because love might forgive, but justice keeps receipts, and I was just getting started. People think betrayal happens in a moment, a single cruel sentence, a door slammed shut. But I know better. Betrayal is built slowly, brick by brick, out of every, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll pay you back," that never came true. 45 years ago, Henry and I opened our little grocery store on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta. We worked 7 days a week. He handled the register. I stocked shelves, cleaned floors, kept books by hand because computers scared him. We made just enough to keep the lights on and raise our son, Marcus. When Marcus married Vanessa, I thought I'd finally get to rest. She walked into our lives wearing pearls and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Henry whispered, "Give her a chance." And I did. I gave her everything. The first year of their marriage, we gave them $15,000 to pay off Marcus's student loans. The second year, another $40,000 as a down payment for their first home. "It's not charity," Henry said. "It's family." I worked extra shifts at the store even after Henry's back gave out. I remember counting bills on the kitchen table at midnight, my fingers stiff from arthritis, whispering to myself, "Just a little longer. They'll appreciate it someday." Every Christmas, Vanessa thanked me with gifts that cost far less than the ribbon she wrapped them in. Perfume, scarves, scented candles, small things that smelled nice but never covered the scent of pity. When our granddaughter, Alyssa, was born, I drove to their house every morning for 6 months to babysit, so Vanessa could focus on her wellness business. I changed diapers, sang lullabies, cooked dinner, and cleaned while she posted inspirational quotes about independence on social media. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone. She loves doing it. Besides, free childcare saves us $2,000 a month. I remember standing by the sink, the sponge dripping water, realizing she wasn't talking about a helper. She was talking about me. Henry got sick the following year. Heart failure. The store had to close. I sold most of the equipment and donated the rest. Vanessa said, "You really should downsize, Mom. That neighborhood's going nowhere." So we moved into the guest house behind Marcus's property. I offered to pay rent. Marcus refused. Vanessa smiled and said, "Don't be silly. You're family." The next month, she started sending me utility bills, neatly printed with highlighted totals. It wasn't about money, it was about power. When Henry's health declined, I did the caregiving. Pills, hospital runs, midnight emergencies. Vanessa visited mostly for photo ops, arranging flowers by his bed, smiling for the nurses. The day Henry passed, she cried the loudest. Her mascara ran perfectly, like it had rehearsed. I wanted to believe grief softened people. Instead, it stripped her mask clean. Looking back, I can trace the slope of my own blindness. Every check I signed, every time I said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. There's a notebook I kept all those years. Small, leather, faded around the edges. Inside, every month's expenses. $400 for their car insurance. Wanting $200 for Marcus's business loan when his coffee shop failed. $2,800 in cash when Vanessa said her friend's company needed short-term investors. Total, $133,000. All from retirement money Henry and I had saved since 1978. He used to say, "When we're old, we'll travel." We never left Georgia. I think about the times I stood at the store window watching people rush by with grocery bags, wondering if generosity could buy safety. It can't. It only buys silence, until the day they decide they don't need you anymore. That night after the funeral, I opened Henry's Bible. Between Psalm 27 and 28 was a folded note in his handwriting. "If you ever doubt your worth, look at the work of your hands. You built everything they stand on." My throat tightened. I hadn't built just shelves or accounts. I'd built their security, their chance to mock me without consequence. But reading his words, something inside me steadied. I realized every sacrifice I'd made wasn't wasted. It was documentation. Proof of who I had been and what they had become. Vanessa could erase me from her guest list. She could pretend I was just a burden in the guest house, but she could never erase the decades written in ink, receipts, and calloused hands. So I closed the Bible, placed the note back, and whispered, "Thank you, Henry. I understand now." That was the moment grief shifted shape. It stopped being pain and became evidence, and evidence, unlike love, does not disappear. The night after Henry's funeral, the house felt too big for one person and too small for air. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and collapsing with every sigh I took. Grief doesn't come in waves. It comes in bricks, heavy and square, pressing against your ribs until you forget what breathing feels like. I made tea I didn't drink. I set 2 cups on the table out of habit, one for me, one for him. The chair across from mine stayed empty, like a silent witness. Vanessa's laughter floated from upstairs, the rhythm of her heels, the clink of glasses. She and Marcus were drinking wine, their voices casual, as if the man who built their home hadn't just been lowered into the ground that morning. Then I heard it. Her voice, low and sharp. "She won't last long. Once the paperwork clears, we can sell the property. You'll handle it, right?" My blood ran cold. There it was, the truth, plain as daylight, spoken under my own roof. I set the cup down so slowly it didn't make a sound. My hands trembled, but not from shock this time, from understanding. I walked to the hallway and looked up the staircase. The chandelier lights shimmered, casting soft gold across the photos on the wall. Family pictures, birthdays, graduations, Christmas dinners. I stared at them one by one, realizing every smile I'd loved had turned into evidence of how blind I'd been. The last photo on the wall was of Henry and me at our 50th anniversary. He'd kissed my forehead and whispered, "We made it, Clara." Now, standing there, I whispered back, "No, we didn't." My knees weakened. I sat on the bottom step and covered my face. For a long while, I didn't cry. Not properly. The tears stayed behind my eyes, thick and burning, refusing to fall. I thought of the years, the money, the love, all turned into tools they used to cage me. Was I really that desperate for their approval? The clock struck midnight. Its echo filled the house like a countdown. I went to the guest room where Henry's belongings were packed in boxes. His favorite cardigan still smelled faintly of aftershave. I sank onto the bed and whispered, "Henry, tell me what to do." Silence. Only the sound of wind brushing against the window pane. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw his old fountain pen on the nightstand, the one he used to sign every important document. It had rolled slightly, the nib pointing toward the small safe beneath the bed. It felt like a sign. I pulled out the safe, entered the code. Our wedding date. Inside lay folders, neatly labeled. Mortgage, insurance, deed. Henry's handwriting was steady even at the end, and beneath them, a sealed envelope addressed to me. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a check for $12,000. The note read, "In case you ever need to start over, not everything we built is theirs." I pressed the paper to my chest. For the first time that night, the tears came, not from despair, but from relief. It was as if Henry had reached through the dark just to remind me that I still had choices. I stayed awake until dawn, sitting by the window, watching the street lamps fade. The first birds began to sing, small but persistent. That's when I realized something. I wasn't crying anymore. I was planning. By the time the sun climbed above the trees, the fog in my head had cleared. I walked into the kitchen, made a list on the back of an old grocery receipt. Go to the bank. Call Attorney Davis, change the locks. Simple steps, nothing dramatic, just action. Quiet, deliberate, final. I picked up my wedding ring and turned it between my fingers. It caught the light like a promise. Downstairs, Vanessa's voice echoed again, sleepy, annoyed. "Where's the sugar?" she snapped. I smiled faintly. "You'll have to buy your own," I whispered. Then I slipped the note into my purse, grabbed Henry's pen, and stepped outside. The morning air was cold, clean, like it had been scrubbed of the night's poison. Behind me, the house stood still. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like mine. But that was all right, because what was coming next would make sure they never called it theirs either. That was the night I broke, and the morning I began again. By sunrise, I had already showered, dressed, and brewed a pot of coffee, strong enough to wake the dead, or at least one stubborn 78-year-old. The house upstairs was still silent. Vanessa and Marcus were probably asleep, the wine glasses from last night still on the counter. I looked around the kitchen, my kitchen, and realized how much of myself had been poured into this house. Every mug, every curtain, every creak in the floorboards had a memory attached to it. And yet, none of it was really mine anymore. I poured the coffee into a thermos, grabbed my handbag, and stepped outside. The cold morning air bit at my cheeks, but it felt good, real, alive. At 9:03 a.m., I walked into First Atlantic Bank, the same place Henry and I had opened our first savings account 47 years ago. Back then, the manager had given us free pens and a handshake that meant something. Today, the place smelled like printer ink and disinfectant, new faces behind new counters. The young man at the desk, his name tag read Jordan, smiled politely. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" I placed my checkbook on the counter. "I need to make some changes to my accounts." His fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Sure thing. What kind of changes?" "Cancel every automatic transfer under my son's name. Close any shared access. Remove his authorization from my credit cards and insurance accounts." Jordan blinked. "All of them?" "All of them," I said. My voice was calm, almost gentle. The kind of tone people use when they've already buried enough to know what final means. He typed for a long while. "Do you want to set up new beneficiaries?" "Yes," I said, "but not today. Let's just make sure I can breathe without someone else's permission first." He glanced up, uncertain whether to smile. "Understood, ma'am." The printer hummed. One by one, the documents slid out, warm and smelling faintly of toner. I signed each page with Henry's old fountain pen, the same one I'd found the night before. With every signature, it felt like cutting a thread that had been choking me for years. When it was done, Jordan handed me the final confirmation sheet. "You're all set, Mrs. Johnson. Everything's in your name only now." I exhaled. "Thank you, son." As I turned to leave, he hesitated. "If you don't mind me saying, you look relieved." I smiled, a small, tired smile. Freedom has a weight, but it's lighter than guilt. Outside, the wind had picked up. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking home. My legs hurt, but my steps felt steady. Halfway down the block, my phone rang. "Marcus." I let it buzz twice before answering. "Yes? Mom," he started, his voice tight. "Vanessa says the mortgage payment didn't go through. What's happening?" "I know," I said. "I stopped the transfers." There was silence on the other end. Then disbelief. "You what?" "You heard me." "Mom, are you old?" I cut in. "Yes. Confused? Not anymore." He stammered. "You can't just—" "I can," I said quietly, and I did. He muttered something I couldn't quite catch. Maybe, "Vanessa's gonna be furious," and hung up. 5 minutes later, Vanessa called. Her tone was sugar over steel. "Mother," she said, stretching the word like a piece of gum, "there must be a mistake. The account shows 0 transfer for this month." "No mistake," I replied. A pause. "Then what exactly is going on?" I took a slow sip of coffee, feeling the heat roll down my throat like courage. "I only help special people," I said softly. She inhaled sharply. "Excuse me," I repeated, enunciating each word like it was carved in stone. "I only help special people." The line went silent for 2 full seconds before she hissed, "You'll regret this," and hung up. I smiled. For once I didn't feel fear, only clarity. When I got home, the kitchen looked different. Or maybe I did. I put on an old jazz record Henry loved, the one with the scratches near the chorus. The melody filled the air, warm and familiar. I poured another cup of coffee and sat by the window. Outside, a delivery truck passed, birds landed on the fence, and sunlight slid across the table. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed, because the first cut had been made. And like any surgeon knows, sometimes you have to cut to save what's still alive. They say silence is golden, but in my house that morning, silence was gasoline. It only took one spark for everything to catch fire. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. First Marcus, then Vanessa, then Marcus again. Each call left a sharper voicemail than the last. "Mom, we need to talk. It's urgent." "Mrs. Johnson, this could ruin our credit." "Are you out of your mind?" I let them pile up. I wanted to hear what desperation really sounded like. At 3 p.m., the doorbell rang. Not once, but in furious bursts. I opened the door to see Vanessa standing there. Perfect hair, perfect lipstick, rage barely hidden under perfume. Behind her, Marcus looked smaller than I remembered, his tie loose, eyes darting between us. "Mother," Vanessa began, forcing a smile that cracked at the edges. "There's been a misunderstanding. You didn't mean to cancel the transfers, right?" "I meant every single one," I said. Her smile vanished. "You can't just do that. The mortgage is due. The kids' tuition is none of my responsibility," I said, voice even. Marcus stepped forward. "Mom, please. You've been under a lot of stress. Maybe we should talk to someone about this." I tilted my head. "Someone like who?" He hesitated. "A professional. You know, just to make sure you're thinking clearly." There it was, the script. When guilt doesn't work, they try gaslighting. "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years," I said, "and you can stop rehearsing that line. It's older than I am." Vanessa's tone hardened. "If you keep this up, Marcus will have no choice but to take legal action. The bank said," I interrupted, "that every account is under my name. That means I decide what leaves and what stays. Do you want me to read you the confirmation number?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then glared at Marcus. "Say something," she snapped at him. He rubbed his temples. "Mom, this isn't you. You're acting unstable." I laughed softly. "Unstable? I buried my husband 3 days ago, and I'm the only one here who remembers what stability looks like." Vanessa crossed her arms. "You're being cruel." "No," I said, "I'm being consistent. There's a difference." The color drained from her face. She took a deep breath, then tried another angle. "Pity. We're a family, Clara. We just need time to adjust. Think of the children." "The children?" I repeated. "You mean the ones I babysat for free while you posted yoga videos online?" Her jaw tightened. "You should leave," I said quietly. "Excuse me?" "I said," I repeated, "you should leave. Now." For a second, she didn't move. Then she turned sharply and stormed out, heels stabbing the floor. Marcus lingered, eyes glassy. "Mom," he whispered. I looked at him, really looked. My boy. Gray at the temples now, once so full of promise. I remembered his first day of college, his nervous smile when he asked for money, just until next semester. "How did we get here?" I asked softly. He didn't answer. He just stared at the ground and followed his wife out the door. When the engine of their SUV roared down the driveway, the house went silent again. But this time, it wasn't the heavy silence of grief. It was the stillness before a storm. That night, I poured myself a small glass of Henry's favorite whiskey. I'd never liked the taste. Too harsh. But tonight it felt right. The burn reminded me I was still alive. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote in my notebook, Day 1, cut supply. Result, chaos. Expected. Underneath it, I added another line. Next step, document every reaction. Collect proof. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from an unknown number. "You'll regret this. Families stick together. Don't make us act." No name. But I didn't need one. I snapped a photo of the message, printed it using my home printer, and slid it into a folder labeled Evidence, Phase 1. Then I poured another inch of whiskey and whispered to Henry's photo on the counter, "Looks like we've started something." The next morning, I saw Vanessa's post on social media. "Taking care of aging parents is never easy. Please keep us in your prayers as we navigate this tough time." 2,000 likes, a dozen heart emojis, and not one mention of the $133,000 that aging parent had already given them. I smiled. Let her play her part online, because I was already preparing for mine. And when the curtain rose, she'd wish she'd stayed off stage. The morning after Vanessa's post went viral, I woke up to find 3 missed calls from old friends, all asking if I was doing okay. I didn't bother answering. People rarely want the truth. They just want to feel kind for asking. Instead, I sat at my desk, opened my notebook, and flipped to a fresh page. Step 2. Seek counsel. Translate pain into language they respect. Paper, law, and evidence. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 15 years. "Davis Law Office," a familiar voice answered. "Harold," I said, my voice steady. "It's Clara Johnson." There was a pause, then a soft exhale. "Clara, I'm sorry. I heard about Henry. How are you holding up?" "I'm standing," I replied, "but I might need help staying that way." Within an hour, I was sitting across from him in his downtown office. He looked older now, thinner hair, thicker glasses, but the same kind eyes Henry had trusted for decades. He poured coffee and listened as I told him everything. The funeral, the words Vanessa said, the accounts, the threats. I didn't dramatize a thing. I just laid out the facts, because truth, on its own, was dramatic enough. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "They're trying to declare you incompetent, Clara." I raised an eyebrow. "I figured as much." He leaned forward. "You need to document everything. Keep a log. Record calls if possible. Save texts, posts, emails. We'll establish a pattern. Financial coercion and emotional abuse. The state takes elder exploitation seriously." "Elder exploitation," I repeated, rolling the phrase around like a new taste. It fit, cold but correct. Finally, something that named the thing I'd been feeling but never known how to describe. He handed me a folder. "These are templates for financial logs and witness statements. Fill them out daily. And Clara, don't let them see fear. Fear gives power." I smiled faintly. Fear's already been evicted. When I got home, I placed the folder next to Henry's photo. "We've got a lawyer now," I told him. "You'd like him. Still uses fountain pens?" That afternoon, I took a walk to the church garden. It was quiet there, only the sound of bees and wind through the magnolia trees. Mrs. Grant, an old friend from choir, spotted me and hurried over. "Clara, honey, I saw what she posted online," she said, clutching my hands. "You don't deserve that." I laughed softly. "Deserve has nothing to do with it. It's math now. Numbers, dates, facts." Her brow furrowed. "You sound like a lawyer." "Maybe I'm learning," I said. She hesitated, then pulled a folded pamphlet from her purse. "Our church runs a support group now. Seniors who've been taken advantage of by their own families. You should come. Sometimes it helps just to say the words out loud." I almost said no. Old habits die hard, the habit of silence most of all. But something in her eyes, that mix of worry and recognition, made me nod. All right, maybe once. The next evening, I walked into the basement of the community center. The smell of coffee and paper greeted me. Around a dozen people sat in a circle, men and women, gray hair and tired smiles. A sign taped to the wall read, "Elder Financial Abuse Awareness Group." The facilitator, a gentle woman named Yvonne, smiled. "Welcome, Ms. Johnson. You can just listen tonight if you'd like." So I did. I listened to stories that sounded far too familiar. daughters forging signatures, sons cashing checks, nieces taking houses for safekeeping. When my turn came, I surprised myself by speaking. My daughter-in-law told me to pack my bags and never come back. Then she tried to take my house. The room went silent. Then heads began to nod. Someone murmured, "Happened to me, too." It hit me. I wasn't crazy or cruel or ungrateful. I was part of a pattern. After the meeting, Yvonne handed me a brochure. "You're doing the right thing, Clara. We fight with paper and truth. The law's slow, but it moves." On the way home, the streetlights flickered on, painting long shadows across the sidewalk. I felt lighter, not happy, but solid. That night, I reorganized my dining table into what Harold would later call a war desk, labeled folders, finances, messages, threats, social media, witnesses, every document scanned, printed, and logged. At the top of the first page, I wrote a line in bold pen, "Love should never need a receipt, but survival does." When I was done, I made tea, chamomile, Henry's favorite. The house was quiet, but not lonely this time, because now my silence wasn't submission. It was a strategy. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, folded neatly in a cream-colored envelope that smelled faintly of perfume and arrogance. Notice of petition for guardianship. I read it twice before the words settled like stones in my stomach. They were trying to have me declared incompetent. My own son had signed the papers. For a moment, I just stood in the kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock. I expected to feel anger, maybe heartbreak, but what came instead was something colder, a clean, focused kind of clarity. I called Harold Davis immediately. He picked up on the second ring. "Clara, they're moving faster than we thought," I said, handing him the news through the phone line. "Guardianship petition," he muttered. "Classic financial play. They want control of your estate. We'll respond immediately." "What do I do in the meantime?" "Nothing rash," he said. "Just keep being exactly what you are. Competent, articulate, and impossible to intimidate." I almost laughed. I can manage that. That afternoon, 2 visitors showed up at my door, a young social worker and a notary, both polite, both nervous. "Mrs. Johnson," the social worker began, "we've been asked to perform a wellness evaluation. Just routine, of course." "Of course," I said, gesturing toward the living room. "Would you like coffee? Tea? Proof of my sanity?" She blinked, unsure whether to smile. "Just some standard questions." "Fire away." For the next 30 minutes, she asked about my finances, my medications, my daily routines. I answered every question precisely. Birth dates, account numbers, even the serial number of my late husband's watch. When she asked if I ever felt disoriented or confused, I leaned forward and said, "Only when people half my age assume my wrinkles mean weakness." Her pen froze mid-sentence. Then she smiled. A real smile this time. "You're sharper than most people I meet, Mrs. Johnson." When they left, I closed the door and exhaled. It wasn't relief I felt. It was control. For the first time in months, maybe years, I was steering the story. The next day, Vanessa called, feigning concern. "Mother, I heard about the evaluation. You know, we just want what's best for you." "What's best for me?" I said. "Funny. I thought you wanted what's left of me." "Don't be cruel," she said softly, the way snakes move before striking. "The court just needs to be sure you're, well enough to stop funding your lifestyle?" I asked. Silence. Then, "You've changed." "Yes," I said. Finally. When I hung up, I printed the call log, stapled it to my growing folder labeled Evidence, Phase 2, and placed it beside the others. That weekend, Harold met me at the diner near my house. He ordered coffee, I brought the folders. The waitress called me sweetheart, and for once, I didn't mind. Harold flipped through the documents, printed texts, social media screenshots, notarized logs. This is solid, Clara. You've built a stronger case than half the paralegals in this city. Old habits, I said, sipping tea. When you've balanced books for 40 years, you learn to keep receipts. He grinned. Their attorney will try to paint you as paranoid. Let them. By the time we're done, it'll look like self-defense. Good, I said, because I'm done playing the victim. That evening, a knock at my door. It was Marcus. Alone this time, tie loose, face pale. Mom, he said quietly, Vanessa's pushing this too far, but I already signed. I didn't know. You didn't read it, I interrupted. That's your pattern, Marcus. You don't know because you don't look. You don't look because it's easier not to feel guilty. He lowered his eyes. She said you needed help. I do, I said, stepping closer. Help remember who I raised, a man with a spine. Have you seen him lately? He flinched, then whispered, They'll drag this to court, Mom. I know, I said. I'm already dressed for it. He looked at me for a long moment, searching for the weakness that used to make his life easier. He didn't find it. When he left, I watched from the window as he sat in his car for almost 5 minutes before driving away. I didn't wave. Later that night, Harold called again. Good news. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing. We'll present your documentation. The social worker's report will help. It's glowing. I smiled. So am I, apparently. He chuckled. You're remarkable, Clara. Most people would have broken by now. Oh, I did, I said softly. But breaking isn't the same as surrendering. When the call ended, I stood in the quiet kitchen and stared at the papers spread before me. Legal forms, statements, photos. Each page a weapon, each signature a boundary redrawn. I whispered to Henry's picture. They wanted a guardian. They'll get one, just not the kind they expected. Then I turned off the lights, leaving only the glow from the street lamp spilling across the folders. It looked like armor. And that night, I slept better than I had in years. By the time the preliminary hearing was set, my dining table no longer looked like a place for meals. It looked like a command center. Stacks of manila folders lined up neatly, bank records, legal notices, social media, text messages, witness statements, each labeled in thick black ink, my handwriting steady and deliberate. I had learned that power didn't come from noise. It came from documentation. Every insult Vanessa texted became a screenshot. Every voicemail Marcus left became an MP3 file saved under Exhibit C. Every concerned social media post from Vanessa. Archived, printed, dated. The church ladies started calling me Detective Clara. I didn't correct them. One Tuesday morning, I carried the first batch of evidence to Harold's office. He whistled low when he saw the binders. You've turned your life into a case study. I smiled. Then maybe other women won't have to learn the hard way. He flipped through a section labeled Pattern of Financial Dependence, dates, amounts, explanations, tuition, mortgage help, business loans. The totals at the bottom glared like headlights, $133,000. Harold shook his head. They can't spin this, Clara. It's textbook exploitation. That's the word, I said quietly. Exploit. He nodded. It's ugly, but it's also undeniable. When I left his office, I didn't go straight home. I stopped by the church again. Mrs. Grant was in the garden, trimming roses. She smiled when she saw me. You look lighter. I traded guilt for paperwork, I said. That evening, she invited me to speak at the next meeting of the senior support group. Just tell them what you've learned, how you got your footing back. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't a speaker. I was a bookkeeper, a widow who'd just learned the language of law and betrayal. But then I thought about the others sitting in that circle, the quiet faces, the hands that trembled when they talked about losing homes and trust. So I said yes. The following Thursday, I stood in front of 12 people in that same church basement. The smell of burnt coffee and hope filled the room. My daughter-in-law tried to have me declared incompetent, I began. What she didn't know was that I've been keeping books longer than she's been alive. They laughed softly. the kind of laugh that comes from recognition, not humor. I told them about the bank, the lawyer, the folders, about the day I learned that silence could be weaponized and that receipts were more powerful than tears. When I finished, a woman named Lorraine raised her hand. Her voice shook. "How did you stop feeling ashamed?" I thought about it for a long moment. "By realizing shame is just loyalty to the wrong people," I said. The room went still. Then someone whispered, "Amen." After the meeting, a few stayed behind. We exchanged stories, compared notes. One man had been tricked into signing over his retirement fund. A widow lost her house to a grandson's fake business venture. By the end of the night, we'd started a new folder together, community cases. I offered to help them organize paperwork. Mrs. Grant brought coffee. Lorraine offered her nephew's help with scanning. Little by little, our pain started turning into data. Not sobs, not gossip, but hard evidence. A week later, Yvonne, the facilitator, approached me with an idea. "Clara, you're good at this. Structure, timelines, documentation. What if we built a small local registry? Just a private record for victims of financial abuse?" I stared at her, surprised. "A database?" She nodded. "Exactly. So when someone walks in saying, 'My daughter took my pension,' we can connect them with others who've fought back. Lawyers, advisors, you." I smiled. "You're talking about a revolution, Yvonne." She grinned. "Maybe, or maybe just justice. One spreadsheet at a time." That night I came home to an empty house, but it didn't feel hollow. I brewed chamomile tea, sat at the window, and opened my notebook. On the top of a new page I wrote, "Justice is slow, but it remembers." Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Porch lights glowing like sentinels. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed. I thought of the women in that basement, the folders stacked in Harold's office, the growing pile of evidence on my table. Vanessa still believed she was winning, that her narrative online was truth. Let her. Because the real story was being written right here, in ink and silence, in signatures and timestamps. I closed my notebook and looked at Henry's photo. "Looks like I've started something bigger than us, love," I whispered. And for the first time, the silence didn't echo. It resonated. The courthouse smelled of paper, coffee, and fear. Mostly theirs, not mine. I walked in wearing a gray suit Henry had bought me 30 years ago for our anniversary. It still fit. Harold carried 2 thick binders under his arm, labeled Evidence, Phase 1 and Phase 2. Vanessa and Marcus were already seated across the aisle, dressed in matching navy blue. They looked like a magazine spread titled Perfect Couple, Perfect Lies. She didn't look at me. He did, briefly, then looked away. The bailiff called the case. In the matter of Johnson versus Johnson, petition for guardianship. The judge was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and the kind of stillness that made lies tremble. Vanessa's attorney stood first, smooth and confident. "Your Honor, this case is about concern, not greed. My clients only wish to ensure Mrs. Johnson's safety and financial stability in her old age." "Concern," I whispered under my breath. "Costs $133,000, apparently." Harold placed a hand on my arm, a silent reminder, patience, not provocation. The opposing lawyer continued, his voice full of feigned sympathy. "Mrs. Johnson has exhibited erratic behavior, financial irresponsibility, and possible cognitive decline following the loss of her husband." He gestured to Vanessa, who dabbed the corner of her eye with a tissue. I wanted to laugh. She should have gone into acting. When it was Harold's turn, he rose slowly, adjusting his glasses. "Your Honor," he began, "what my client has exhibited is clarity, not decline. We will demonstrate a consistent pattern of financial exploitation and manipulation at the hands of those claiming to protect her." He opened the binder. The sound of the metal rings clicking echoed through the room like a gavel before the gavel. He passed the first exhibit to the judge, bank transfers totaling over $133,000. Handwritten notes, text messages demanding money, social media posts about caring for aging parents made the same week as bank withdrawals. Then came the wellness report, the one from the social worker who'd visited my home. Mrs. Johnson is mentally sound, physically independent, and financially literate. No evidence of cognitive impairment. The judge raised an eyebrow. Impressive. Vanessa's face paled slightly, but she quickly recovered, whispering to her lawyer. Next came the testimonies. Mrs. Grant, from church, spoke about seeing Vanessa humiliate me in public. Yvonne, from the support group, explained the pattern of coercion I'd faced. Even the young banker, Jordan, testified that I'd handled every transaction with precision. By the time Harold was done, the courtroom felt heavier, not with noise, but with truth. The opposing lawyer rose again, desperate now. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, "if I may ask, do you truly believe your son and daughter-in-law meant you harm?" I stood slowly. My knees ached, but my voice did not. "I believe intent stops mattering once the damage is done," I said, "and I believe love without respect is just a softer word for control." He hesitated. "So you're saying you don't trust your family?" I met his eyes. "I'm saying family isn't who drains your bank account and calls it care." A few people in the gallery murmured. Even the stenographer looked up. The judge tapped her pen thoughtfully. "Mrs. Johnson, may I ask, do you have proof of all this?" I nodded toward Harold. "2 binders, Your Honor, labeled, dated, signed, and notarized." She smiled faintly. "Efficient." Vanessa suddenly stood, voice trembling with outrage. "You're twisting everything. We took care of her. We gave her a home." I turned to face her fully. "You gave me a room and called it mercy. You took my home and called it family." The words hung in the air like frost. The judge lifted a hand. "That's enough." She flipped through the final pages of the file, then set them down carefully. "I've seen many families fall apart over money, but this, Mrs. Johnson, this is something else entirely. You've been more than competent. You've been careful." Her gaze shifted to Vanessa and Marcus. "This court finds no evidence of cognitive decline. The petition for guardianship is denied." Marcus slumped back in his chair. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed again. The judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I recommend that Mrs. Johnson seek a restraining order if further harassment occurs. This case is dismissed." The gavel struck, sharp, final. The room exhaled. Harold turned to me, whispering, "You did it." I shook my head. "We did it. Me, Henry, every woman in that basement who thought she was alone." As I stood, Vanessa finally looked at me. Her eyes weren't angry anymore. They were scared. I picked up my handbag and smiled faintly. "Be careful what you call weakness. Sometimes it's just patience in disguise." Outside, the spring air felt new, like the world had been rinsed clean. Reporters lingered by the steps, but I didn't stop. I didn't need applause. Justice doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it comes with silence and the sound of your own heels on courthouse steps. When I reached the car, Harold held the door open for me. "What now?" he asked. I looked back at the building one last time. "Now," I said, "we let consequences do the talking." 3 weeks after the court ruling, the world went quiet again. Not the suffocating quiet of grief, but the soft, clean quiet of closure. I spent the first few days tending to my small garden behind the house. The soil was dark and forgiving, nothing like people. Every time I pressed a seed into the earth, I thought, this is what control feels like. Planting something and knowing it'll grow only if you choose to water it. Then one afternoon, Harold called. "You might want to see this," he said. "It's public record now." He sent me a link. Foreclosure notice, 182 Carver Lane, Marcus and Vanessa's address. It turned out that while they were busy trying to prove me incompetent, they'd missed 3 consecutive mortgage payments. The court fees had drained what little savings they had left. By the end of the month, the bank repossessed their house. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just whispered, The math checks out. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. People who used to wave politely from across the lawn now crossed the street to avoid eye contact with Vanessa. Her perfect image, the devoted wife and influencer who cared for her elderly mother-in-law, crumbled overnight. Screenshots of the court rulings circulated online. Someone even posted a clip of the judge's verdict. Underneath, a comment read, "Turns out the old lady was the smartest one in the room." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. 2 weeks later, Marcus showed up at my gate. No suit this time, just jeans and a wrinkled shirt. He looked smaller somehow, as if he'd been deflated from the inside out. "Mom," he said, voice low, "can we talk?" I hesitated, then opened the gate. He stood there, eyes red. "She left, took the car, took what was left of the money." I said nothing. "I know I hurt you," he continued. "I let her talk me into things I didn't understand. I just wanted peace." "Peace bought with someone else's dignity isn't peace," I said quietly. He swallowed hard. "I lost everything." I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who'd once cried when his toy truck broke, the one who'd promised, "When I grow up, I'll take care of you, Mom." "Maybe losing everything," I said, "is the only way you'll learn what everything means." He nodded, tears spilling silently, and whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't forgive him, not yet. But I didn't close the gate either. When he left, I sat on the porch with my tea. The air smelled of rain and renewal. A few days later, I got a letter, a short one, from Vanessa. No apologies, just 2 lines written in hurried ink. "You ruined us. I hope you're proud." I folded the letter neatly and filed it under evidence. Phase closed. Because even when the war is over, I keep my receipts. Time passed. The world moved on. I started volunteering at the support group more often, helping others file legal paperwork, teaching them how to organize their finances. One of the younger members, a woman in her 40s, asked me, "Don't you ever get tired, Mrs. Johnson?" I smiled. Tired of fighting, always, but tired of being silent, never again. At night, I still talked to Henry's picture. "You were right," I told him once. "Patience isn't weakness, it's armor." Sometimes I'd imagine him chuckling back, that low, gentle laugh of his. By summer, the garden behind my house was in full bloom. Tomatoes, basil, a stubborn rose bush that had refused to flower for years finally opened. Life was quiet, but not empty. One afternoon, I sat with a cup of lemonade and my old notebook. On the last page, I wrote, "They thought money was power, but power is being able to walk away and never look back." Then I closed it, set it on the table, and watched the sun slip lower behind the trees. For the first time since Henry's passing, I didn't feel haunted. I felt at home. 6 months after the trial, I sold the house. Not out of bitterness, out of choice. The walls had seen too much pretending, too much noise that called itself love. I wanted air that hadn't heard Vanessa's voice. I used part of the money to buy a small cottage near Savannah, 2 streets from the sea. The first night I slept there, I left the windows open and listened to the ocean breathe. It wasn't quiet, it was alive. I kept only what mattered: Henry's photo, his fountain pen, and the notebook. Thick now, pages filled with evidence, receipts, and eventually, lessons. I planted lavender by the porch, just like he'd always wanted. The scent carried through the open door every morning. Life slowed down, but it didn't stop. I joined a watercolor class at the community center. My hands, once stiff from bookkeeping, now danced across paper. At first, I painted flowers, safe, easy things. Then one day, I painted a courtroom, sunlight spilling through tall windows, a woman standing calm in gray. I titled it Competent. The instructor asked if it was me. I said, "It used to be." On Fridays, I volunteered at the senior legal aid office in town. Most days, I just helped sort paperwork, make coffee, listen. But sometimes women came in with stories too familiar, sons taking deeds, daughters hiding checks, helpers who weren't helping. I'd hand them a folder and say, "Start here, write it down, every word, every date. You can't fix what you don't record." Their faces would light up, not with joy, but recognition, the same flicker I'd seen in the church basement that first night. By autumn, the local paper ran a feature about the group I helped build, Voices of Dignity. The headline read, "Senior Women Turning Betrayal into Advocacy." They asked for a photo. I almost said no, but Yvonne insisted. So there I was, on page 3, gray hair, calm smile, hands resting on a stack of folders. The caption read, "Clara Johnson, 78, retired store owner and survivor of elder financial abuse." I laughed when I saw it. Survivor. That word used to sound like a scar. Now it felt like a medal. One afternoon, Marcus called again. "Mom," he said, "I found a steady job. I'm paying my debts. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm trying." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then I realized I didn't need to. "I'm glad, Marcus," I said simply. "Build something honest. That's all that lasts." After we hung up, I sat by the window watching the waves. I didn't cry. Forgiveness, I'd learned, isn't a gift you give someone else. It's a room you clear out so you can breathe again. One morning in December, I woke to find a letter in the mailbox. It was from a woman in Michigan who'd seen the article. "Dear Mrs. Johnson, my daughter took my pension. I thought my life was over until I read about you. Thank you for proving it's not too late for people like us." I folded the letter and slipped it inside my notebook, next to Henry's old note. That night, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, the sea breeze carried the smell of salt and lavender. The sun sank low, casting long orange ribbons across the sky. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I'd built. Out of paper, pain, and patience. Freedom, I realized, didn't look like youth or noise. It looked like peace. I whispered, half to myself, half to the wind, "Loneliness with peace is better than company with cruelty." A dove landed on the railing, the same kind Henry used to feed on Sunday mornings. It tilted its head as if listening. "Looks like we made it, love," I said. And somewhere in that gentle dusk, I swear I could almost hear him answer. I'm 78 years old, and for the first time in my life, I understand what freedom tastes like. It's not loud. It doesn't come with applause or revenge. It tastes like morning coffee you made for yourself. Strong, quiet, honest. People used to tell me, "Clara, you're too forgiving." They said it like a compliment, but forgiveness without boundaries isn't grace. It's self-erasure. Now, when people ask me what happened, I don't tell them about the court, or the money, or even the betrayal. I tell them about the day I looked in the mirror and saw someone worth protecting. Because that's when everything changed. Henry once told me, "You can't stop storms, but you can build stronger walls." It took me half a lifetime to realize those walls aren't made of brick or wood. They're made of self-respect. So here's my truth, my declaration. Love without respect is not love. Help that costs your dignity is not kindness. And silence, when it protects the wrong people, is betrayal wearing pearls. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt small in your own home, if someone has ever made you feel like your worth expired with your age, hear me, it hasn't. You are not a burden. You are not replaceable. You are the archive of everything your family stands on. When I walked out of that courthouse, I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean. And that's all I ever wanted. Not revenge, not validation, just clarity. Now I live by the sea. Some mornings I paint. Some afternoons I help others write their stories. But every evening I sit by my window, watch the sky fade to gold, and whisper one sentence to myself. Freedom isn't a luxury, it's a right. I used to think starting over at 78 was impossible. Turns out, impossible just takes longer. So if you're watching this, maybe sitting alone at your kitchen table wondering when the love in your house started feeling like debt, this story is for you. Ask yourself the question I once asked in the dark. When did I start buying affection with pieces of myself? And if you know the answer, you already know what to do. Start small. Change a password. Open a new account. Call someone who believes you. Write it down. Every word, every bruise, every withdrawal. Because justice doesn't begin in courtrooms. It begins on kitchen tables with a pen and courage. If you need proof that it's possible, you're looking at her. I'm Clara Johnson, wife, mother, bookkeeper, survivor, and I'm finally the guardian of the one person everyone forgot I could protect, myself. Now, I'll ask you, the person listening, if it happened to you, what would you do differently today? Would you stay silent, or would you build your own file of truth? Leave your story below. Someone out there needs to hear it. And if this story reminds you of someone you love, share it. Maybe it will reach the person who's still waiting for permission to fight back. Because family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect. And freedom, real freedom, doesn't come from being invited. It comes from choosing to walk out with your head high even if no one holds the door. So, from my porch in Savannah, with the sea humming outside and lavender swaying in the breeze, I'll leave you with this. True love doesn't come with a price tag. Self-respect doesn't expire with age. And freedom, it never was too expensive to buy. It was too priceless to give away. Now tell me, in the comments below, have you ever mistaken silence for peace? And what would freedom mean to you if you chose it today? When I finally closed that old notebook, I realized something simple. The greatest revenge isn't anger. It's rebuilding yourself so completely that they no longer recognize the person they tried to break. If this story reminded you of your own, don't let shame keep you quiet. Share it so another woman knows she isn't alone. Thank you for spending time with me, with our stories, because these aren't just family dramas. They're lessons about strength, dignity, and quiet courage. If you believe every woman deserves her freedom, click subscribe, share this video, and help us tell more family revenge stories that remind the world respect is earned, dignity is defended. From my porch in Savannah, with lavender, sea air, and peace, this is Clara Johnson signing off.